I'm gonna nerd out on this one a little bit today. So what I want to show you guys is how I do a budget in Excel, and hopefully you'll pick up on some tips and tricks. What's really critical about the way I do this is that I have a full picture of where all my money stands and where all my money sits among all my different accounts on one page. And I'm able to actually track everything so that every time that I track a transaction, it updates in real time. So I'm not having to go in there and like manually program anything. I just update the transaction and it does all the math for me. So let me show you guys what I've got going on here. Okay, on the first tab that kind of shows everything in a snapshot, you're gonna notice that I named it Allocation, and the very first column is called Mental Accounts. So mental accounts are just accounts that people typically have running in their head, like, okay, I have this much money for groceries, I have this much money for eating out, I have this money saved up for X, Y, and Z. Instead of just having those things kind of loosely in your mind, like mentally in your mind, write them out. Like, what specific accounts do you want in your budget here? So what I've come up with is just a general list that looks very similar to what I already do myself. And you'll notice that right at the top I have investments, I have bills, subscriptions, transportation, groceries, eat out, alcohol, debt, hygiene, personal beauty, medical for spouse 1, spouse 2 medical, gifts, recreation, entertainment, parties, etc. You guys can read through the list. What you're seeing here is that these are all the accounts that I want to make sure that I have money in so that I'm ready to spend in any one of those given categories. At the bottom, you can see I have specific savings goals where I want to make sure that I'm saving up for those things and putting money into those accounts. I have this large category, which is just a different way of thinking about the money. So like investments are all typically related to my future. I'm trying to build up my future self. And then now run is anything that I need to spend money on now within, say, the next 30 days or within a month. Sinking funds are going to be things that I will spend money on very as frequently as like every other month, but maybe once a year. So those are things that I don't typically spend money on per month, but I want to make sure that I have money in there for those items. And then savings goals are going to be really big things that I'm saving for. And typically what you'll notice is that if you look at column C, where I have my checking account, I don't really have much money in my savings goals there because I put that money in either my savings account or my money market account, or I take a portion of it and I put it into my brokerage account, so that that money is growing over time, since it's going to be a couple of years before I decide to actually use that money for that specific thing. Here I have a cash account. You can notice I only have $200 for a flex account, and then it says savings, money market, and then liquidity, which is going to be equal to the sum of our checking, cash, savings, and money market. And then brokerage and crypto, I keep those separately. So if you are putting money into your own individual taxable brokerage account or a crypto account, I like to keep track of like where that money is tied to, because you can tell that, yeah, I'm investing some for my future, but I'm also using some of the money that's for a future house or a future car in my brokerage account, so that money is growing as well. Credit card, I do heavily use a credit card, so all my spending is going to occur within the credit card. And what I like to do is checking minus credit. So I have a function here that says checking minus credit, so that I know at all points in time that I have enough money to pay off my credit card at any given point in time. So I don't pay off my credit card once a month, I pay it off like once a week. Just because I want to make sure that I'm getting points from the credit card and that I'm always able to pay it off. That is how I use a credit card. So I've never ever paid interest because this is the way I organize things. Next, I have these rule calculations and rules, and these are those rules I typed out and made up for each individual category. And so, for example, you can see here that I have transportation. I'll cap it at $1,000. I don't feel like I need $1,000 sitting in my checking account for transportation at any given point in time. So what I did was I took $1,000 minus the checking minus credit amount. So that tells me how much money I need in order to reach that cap. I don't want to go below zero. If I go below zero, that means I have too much money in that specific mental account. I don't feel like I need that much money. So I kind of made that logic for all these different things here, and you can kind of come in here. I haven't filled out this particular section. You can see for hygiene, I'm going to cap that at $200. I don't need more than $200 for hygiene, but you just type in that function, and it kind of tells you how much money you need for that thing. Another thing that's really critical about the way I do this is that, you know, your checking account, when people look at their bank accounts, they're going to notice that they have a total of X amount of dollars. In this case, for the example that I've put together, I'm assuming that this is a married couple, and this married couple has saved up $10,300 in their checking account. They have $200 cash. They have $7,500 in their savings, and then they have a money market that has $30,000 sitting in it with a total liquidity of $48,000. You know, if you are following steps to get out of debt and save money, this can be really realistic for what your budget could look like. So those are just some things to check out. But what's really important about these numbers here is that when you are looking at your checking account, your balance, running balance, better match this number. Otherwise, this whole thing is purposeless. I also have this little thing, and you'll notice what I highlight here. I want to always make sure I have an idea of how much cash that I have on hand to spend on any given one of my categories. So this is just every time I you know, every other day I wake up and I just check my bank accounts and make sure that these accounts are matching what I have actually put in here. The brokerage and crypto, these don't match. This is just a running list of how much money I've put into the brokerage account. So I actually don't try to reconcile it for the growth of interest because that fluctuates way too much, and that would just be too crazy to track. What I'm looking for is to make sure that my balance in the actual brokerage account is growing above the money that I put into it based off of my investment portfolio selection. Here I have left to budget, so I'll get into this a little bit more, but this is super powerful. I see with complete transparency, both my wife and I, where all our money stands, how much money we have for specific things, how much money we have for ourselves. You can see that on line 21 and 22. Spouse one money, spouse two money. We give each other free cash money, like free money to spend on however we choose to spend. So those are things that we look for. We have trained ourselves to look at this last column, column K, to really kind of go, you know, when we're out spending, we decide, all right, do we have enough money for groceries? Do I have enough money to spend on myself because I want like a new shirt or something? And it really has made us disciplined to keep everything organized. So how do I do this? What does it feel like? So when you are out and about spending and you're like, okay, I want to go buy a new jacket for myself, and that jacket is $50. You're going to probably use your credit card. So you're going to say I have this ledger set up here for a credit card. And today's date of recording is January 21st, 2022. So I'm going to go to Banana Republic and buy a new jacket, and that new jacket is probably going to cost, you know, $100, let's say. New jacket, Johnny Money. And so I'll say $100, and I'll call myself spouse one money in this example. Oops, spouse. And then we'll come over here and say what type of spending it is. Apparel and clothing. If I spell it wrong, it's going to, there's a data validation that's going to tell you that, hey, like you spelled this wrong, because you want everything to be tracked and spelled correctly. In fact, I can't remember exactly what this was. So this is actually a really good example of how I set this up. And did I even put apparel and clothing as an option in here? The spending type is apparel and clothing. So let's go, I may need to add this in my example file, but let's go ahead and just say spouse one money for now. retry the spouse one. Okay. So real quick, this is a credit card balance. This column up here is going to tell you a sum of column C minus a sum of column D. So basically your debits minus your credits, and you just want to see what your running balance is on your credit card. Of course, we desire the balance to be zero when you pay this off. So this has a little bit different logic. But what you'll do is come back over here. Once you track this transaction and you've just recorded it real quick, you come over to allocations. You're going to notice that, hey, look, $100 for spouse one money was spent, and they now have $400 left to spend. I can now go check to see if my credit card balance is coming out to be $220, and that kind of just gives me an idea of how to spend. Now let me go play with the numbers. What if I spent like $10,000, or $1,000? Let's just add in like 1,000 here and see what happens. Let's go back to the account allocation, or the allocation sheet. You're going to notice that I put a conditional format in these cells, that if any one of these numbers becomes negative, it's going to highlight red. So you can see that it highlighted red here. So this is going to tell me that something went wrong. We overspent, tracked the transaction incorrectly, and it quickly tells me like, okay, something's wrong, something's negative, and we need to go clean that up and make sure that money is allocated efficiently across things. I'm going to go back over here and change this back to $100. The checking account, same logic. You have your date, description, debit, credit, the category that you're putting the money in, the mental account that you're assigning it to, and then what kind of tracking that money actually is. You can see here that the apartment rent, I haven't tracked it completely, so I'm going to take this out of bills, and I'm going to call this rent and mortgage, or maybe I just called it rent. Yep. So we now have a running balance of $8,900, and left to budget is $0. If I come back to allocation, you're going to see that it says $8,900, and again, account reconciliation means I'm going to log into my account and make sure that my checking account is actually $8,900. I do this for every single account type I have. I have a checking account, cash account, savings account, money market account, brokerage account, crypto account, where I'm running these balances and just kind of getting an idea of like how much I have left to budget for each individual mental account. So that's pretty much it. That's how I budget. I'll take a screenshot of this for my wife and I, and when we take a screenshot, we end up basically emailing this to each other and having it in our email so that we can check. That's the way we do it. So I come in here probably every other day and just record the transactions from the last day, 2 or 3 days, and just make sure that everything balances out, and then it kind of constantly informs us where our money is. So let me get into more of the mechanics of how I put this thing together. So if you're interested in using something like this, you can make it yourself, or you can contact me on my website and shoot me a message and say, hey, like, I'd really like this budget template. Can you just send it to me? I might just do that. So the best way to do that is go into the link in the description below and go ahead and let me know that you want this thing, and I will send it to you via email. Okay, now I'm going to show real quick how I put this whole thing together, starting with a blank Excel sheet. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do to get the mechanics started is that we need to save the file. We need to name it something: Excel budget example 001 desktop. Save it on the desktop. Okay, once we save this, the second step is that we need to make all the tabs. I'm going to make this a little simpler than what I actually showed. So we're just going to do Allocation Tab. So right click that first tab and let's rename it Allocation. This next tab, we're going to right click and rename it Checking. We're going to do Savings, rename Savings, rename credit card. So we'll just do those 3 accounts, and then we need to have this rename category list. So the category list is going to be something that is really critical to make sure that everything that you're tracking actually calculates the numbers correctly and is being held accountable for. So I'm going to show what this looks like in the other sheet that I already have put together, and then we'll come back to building this thing out. But the very first thing that we do is we have this category sheet where we come up with a list of all the categories and our way of thinking about the numbers. And I've taken a lot of time to think about this, and I literally do track about 130 different things. But this is one I put together just as an example file. But you can see there's a big category and then the small categories. And why do we have these 2 different categories? That's because there are big categories that you typically think of money, and this kind of helps you like structure the way you think of money in your mind. But big categories, and then how they break down specifically. And this second column is what we're going to use a data validation for, and that data validation is going to keep everything that you track the same amount of characters, the right characters, so that the math actually works out and works automatically for you. So if we just go through real quick through these categories, you have income and the different types of income sources. Usually I don't say income source 1 and income source 2. I say what the actual company is and which spouse is having that money come through. And then we get into investments and the different type of investment categories. You might have bills. This is what most people's budgets look like: rent, electricity, water, house, gas, phone services, things like that. And then transportation. I actually like to track specific little pieces of transportation and types of transportation, and then subscriptions. So real quick, as we're building this out, I want to point the fact out that I've spent a lot of time talking about the mental accounts, but those mental accounts are really the ones I kind of think about consistently. And some of them are the big categories, such as bills. When I think bills, I'm literally thinking of all these different specific types of bills, and that's pretty much what you see here are all those different specific types of bills that I account for. So when I'm budgeting and actually getting the information recorded into this thing, I just put all like rent, electricity, water, house, gas, all into the same category, and that usually becomes a big chunk of money, usually in between $1,500 to $2,000 depending on what bills are due, especially if rent and everything else is due at the same time. Okay, let's get back into the categories. So you are going to need to take time to really come up with your list of like your big categories, big categories, and little or small categories. And then you're going to just have to type them out and really kind of figure out how do you think about everything. Now, instead of me doing this, I'm just going to copy and paste what I've already put in here. So pretending that you already got that part down, because honestly that is the most challenging part, is coming up with your category list. So I'm going to Control A this thing. It grabs this entire table, copy that. I'm going to paste this as values. The reason why I'm doing this is just to show you guys, if you're not familiar with Excel, I'm heavily using tables, and I want to make a table out of this. And so I'm going to go over here to Insert and say Insert Table, and my table has headers. It's not pulling in the headers I want, so I'm going to not select that and say OK. And this is column 1 and 2, big categories, small categories. All right, so now that we have those big and small categories, we can start to work on everything else. So let's start with checking. And I'm going to pull this down just a little bit, pull this over here, make sure I'm using the same exact verbiage that I used. And we're just gonna really like kind of go through each one. So we need a date, we need to know what date things are being tracked. We need a description so that we can kind of do reconciliation and know exactly what that description is. Debit is going to be money that is coming out of an account, and credit is going to be money that is going in, money into an account. And then we have category credit, where we are putting money into a specific category for our mental accounts. And then we have that mental account that we're going to track. And then we have the tracking category. I'm not going to get into this in this video today, but I literally come up with like bar charts and stuff to show how much I've been spending on average over time in each specific category. And because I organize it this way, it allows me to do that. I might just put a quick screenshot of that in there, and just you guys can pause the video and take a look at what that means. And that's going to be a real screenshot of my real spending I've tracked for like the past 3 years. Now, after that, we have balance of that specific account, and then we have left to budget in that specific account. Now that we have this, I'm going to put in some not hypothetical dates, but I'm going to put in the dates that I for 3 different rows. There's a reason why I'm doing this. Usually there's an account balance, so I'm going to say account balance. Let's go ahead and give it a balance, and let's say that that balance is $1,000, 1,000 money in. We have 500 for bills and 500, 200 for eating out, and then 300 for, let's just call it flex. Let's actually take this account balance. So $1,000 coming in, $500 for the specific categories. But real quick, before I actually type this in, I'm going to do a data validation technique that is going to call the specific list of interest. So I'm going to go to data, and then I'm going to go to data validation, and this particular list I only want to pull. So I'm going to click list, and I want to pull what is in my I'm going to pull this into view, allocation sheet. So I'm going to click on column A here, and I kind of did this backwards. I'm also going to copy the allocation as I have it listed here from the example sheet that I've been showing this entire time, and I'm going to control paste values. There we go. So we have this list of the mental accounts that I'm interested in keeping track of. And then I go back to the checking account, and I'm going to see that I have all those mental accounts as a drop down in every single cell here, so that every time I'm tracking something, I'm able to track exactly what those characters are. Apologies for all the horns and stuff in the background. I'm in a crazy busy city, and it is impossible not to hear it. Tracking category, I want to do a data validation against the entire list that is in my category list here. So I'm going to come over here and select the source as column B from category and say OK. And you're going to see that it has a drop down with every single category that I'm interested in tracking here. All right, awesome. For balance is going to start out as whatever the balance is, $1,000 to budget. But now I'm going to start to do some math, and I'm going to use some formulas in order to have a running balance that updates automatically for me. And what I want this to do for column H is that I want the running balance to be equal to the previous balance plus a credit of whatever came into the account minus any debits that came out of the account. And I'll say enter, and then I will drag this down to however many rows I have. Left to budget is going to be similar, except it's going to be equal to the previous amount left to budget plus a credit into the account minus however much we put into a specific mental account. And then I'll drag this down for how many columns. I like these to be number values, so we can go to home. We're going to, I don't know why it's doing that. We're going to go to home, and we're going to go ahead and hit the dollar sign so that it is a dollar amount. I'm going to make this a little bigger and make this a little bigger. We're going to zoom out here just a little bit like that. There's a reason for that here in a second. And then I'm going to say I have a balance account allocation, and these are actually items that I have listed in here way at the bottom, balance, account allocation, so that I know that this particular transaction type is an account allocation. Mental account, I'm not going to put anything for the initial balance, but for this first one, we're going to call bills. Then we're going to have eat out. You can select it if you want to. You can go to eat out. If you type this wrong, eat out, like for example, if I put an X here, it's going to say, hey, retry, eat out. Or even if I put a space, it's going to say retry. So you need to do the exact characters. So it kind of helps to know that from off the top of your head. And then I'll put flex here. And then I'm going to Control A or Command A, and I'm going to create a table out of this thing and say insert table. And the reason why I do a table is because as I start to fill things out and say I'm spending money on eating out, so I went out to eat and I ate at Starbucks. Starbucks, had a coffee, call this eat out, and I'm also disciplined in kind of tracking my descriptions that way. I spent $5, let's just say. Eat out, eat out. Oops. Eat out. And you can see that the balance came down by $5, but the budgets have stayed 0 because I've budgeted everything. So this is nice because you have a running balance here. And you can do some fun things, like you could insert, for that specific account over time, depending on how long you track this, and start to see some really interesting trends. Of course, this is not interesting because I just put in some basic data. But this number always needs to match your bank account, that very last record. And then, of course, I'm an advocate of telling every single dollar where it needs to go. Now we are going to take this and copy it, and we're going to just paste this for our savings and for our checking. And we're just going to go clean this up real quick, make sure that the savings looks good, make sure that the formulas seem right. Kind of make these a little bit larger column width for yourself. And then credit, same thing. And of course the balances will be different based off of whatever balance you have inside your accounts. And then another thing you'll notice that I like to do is in these accounts, I put the balance here and left budget, which is the last row here, over here, but I just like to draw my eyes to it. That's just something that I like to do. And then I also want to scroll through it and keep my headers. So the way you do that is you're gonna just have to come in here, and for each tab you go to view and you hit freeze top row, freeze top row, freeze top row, and you can basically scroll through everything. Now I want to do this whole balance thing. Say balance, and I'm going to use some more formulas. I'm going to use the sum formula, sum, open parentheses. I'm going to click on column D minus the sum of open parentheses, column C, close parentheses, and you're going to see that it says $995, and then we'll say left, we'll just call it budget, left to budget. Let's make this a little smaller so we can pull this to the side. All right, equal, we're going to sum the column D minus the sum of column E, and you can see that those numbers match perfectly. And then put whatever color you like that draws attention to it. These are really critical numbers that always need to match, otherwise this whole thing is just really purposeless. Do the same thing over here. Balance equal sum this minus sum of this, boom, you're done. Equal sum of this minus sum of this, left to budget. Credit card is actually going to be a little different. I'm actually going to delete this last column because it doesn't make sense to say budget, and we're just going to look on a balance And we want the balance to actually be the sum of column C, which is the debits, minus the sum of column D, because we ideally want to make sure that we are getting our credit card down all the way. And we're going to change some of these things here just a little bit. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to make this 0, and I'm just going to say that we spent some money, $10, $10 in each one of these categories, so you can see that, and we'll just say 0 for that. And the logic needs us to change here just a little bit, so equal to the sum of the balance plus the debit column, so instead of the credit, minus the credit. Make sure this is working perfectly. 10, we're going to say eat out. I want to make sure that this is doing this correctly. It's remembering that column, so I hate when it does this. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm just going to start this all over. Equal this plus this minus this. Hit enter, put 0 here. Now it's working correctly. Okay, cool. More Starbucks transactions, sure. Hit Control S or Command S if you're on Mac, and you have this running balance here. For this account, you have the running balance for your checking, and I basically do that for every single type of account that I have, and that kind of sets the stage for the structure of what needs to happen here mechanically. So let's get into how I set up the account allocation tab. So let's get into it. Setting up the allocation tab. Let's get into this. So really what we're going to do is fill out the specific accounts that we're tracking. So checking, savings, and credit. So let's go over here. Let's type in checking, savings, credit, and then we're going to say checking minus credit. And that's going to give us the balance of how much that we are actually saving for. So I'm obviously simplifying this based off of what I had initially set up here and started with. But this is just to illustrate that a lot of the logic is very, very similar and the same. So what I'm going to do is just kind of adjust these so that they're all like the same width. And let's make this a little bigger. And then I'm going to hit Control A, which is going to select all these cells that have been filled out, and I'm going to create a table, a data table. And again, for Excel users, you probably noticed that I use data tables a lot here, but this is nice because as soon as I type in a formula, which is going to stay consistent through this whole thing, it's going to copy that exact same formula. So this is probably the most complicated formula that I'm going to get into here. So I'm going to say equal sum ifs. A sum ifs formula is going to allow me to sum the specific column of a let me move this thing out of the way. It's going to allow me to sum a specific column based off of a criterion in another column. So I want to sum everything up inside column D here, the credit column, when the mental account column is equal to the column in, or the specific value here, so investments, for example. So I'm summing up column D and checking where column F equals investments, and then I'm closing the parentheses and hitting enter. You notice that I did that, but nothing happened because I meant to use column E. This is a quick fix. I meant to say column E, sorry guys. Column E, boom, enter, and you're gonna notice that, hey look, we actually have those specific values there. So I'm going to come over here. Let's put a dollar signs because I want these to be dollar signs. Now I don't want to just sum ifs that specific column. I want to go ahead and subtract anything that is a debit. So sum ifs of the debits, comma, mental accounts, comma, if it equals investments. Boom. So just to illustrate that real quick, if I put in another transaction here, let's say that we have a bill that's to be paid. It's $100 electric bill, right? So we had to pay our electric bill. It was $100, a little pricey this month, and it was electricity. If I spelt this wrong and just said electric, it wouldn't work. It needs electricity, and specifically what you programmed inside that category tab, electricity. Come back over here, you're going to notice that the bills are $100 shorter, so it's calculating that for us in real time, which is really, really nice. So we're going to do the same thing for savings, equal sum ifs of the credit category column, Minto account column, and this specific cell, minus the sum ifs of the debit column, and come back over here, click there, boom, close that parentheses, and we now have the running total. Of course, it looks the same because I use the same exact data for every single one of these ledgers here. For credit, we're going to do the opposite. Actually, we're going to say equal sum ifs of the debit column, Minto category. Click on investments, minus the sum ifs of the credit category. Same logic. So if we ended up paying, say, $100 on the credit card, or not 100, let's just do $10 for example, and we wanted to pay those bills, so it's a credit in, but it's also being applied to, so you kind of have to do double here. And I'm going to call this payment. I don't think I put payment in there. Okay, we'll just call it balance. And payment to credit card. Just tracking this thing real quick. Come back over the allocation. You're going to notice that it's now $10 less. So it's nice that it did that for us. Now, let's come to this last column. We're going to do checking minus the credit balances. And you can see, for example, on Eat Out that it is doing $195 minus $25, which is $70. And so this kind of gives us an idea of how much money we have on hand. Now, if we want to do totals to do that account reconciliation, this is pretty easy, equal sum. And we're going to come over here and we're just going to highlight that, hit equal sum, and then we can drag this to the right, and it tells us what our balance should be. You can change the way this looks for yourself. So if you don't like the table that much, go to this table tab and choose whatever color you like. I like it to look a little more clean and chic like this. And then I come over here to the borders tool, and I like to use these thick borders to kind of just make it look a little punchy. This is all preference at this point, you know, when you're trying to just make it look a particular way. But it kind of creates some division between the account types and the credit and that kind of thing. Nice and clean, really pretty. Another thing we need to do, let's say if you record a transaction wrong and say we accidentally recorded this transaction as $1,000 credit, you're going to notice that it's negative over here. I like those things to stick out, so what I do is I highlight this whole area, and I'm going to do a conditional formatting. Conditional formatting, new role. I'm going to go to classic, and I'm going to go format only cells that contain, and we're going to do a cell value, and that is going to be less than the value of 0, and say okay. Boom. And you can see quickly what is negative. And that's going to inform you, like, hey, you did something wrong. Nothing should be negative here. Everything should be positive. So you got to come in here and fix this. Let's change this back to 100. But that is the way that works. So as you're going along here and you're getting paid, you know, say you get paid $1,500, you and your spouse, company X, spouse 1, company Y, spouse 2, or I use our actual names, so I would say Johnny income, and then my wife's income. So we're gonna say, I'll just leave this blank for mental accounts, and we'll just say income, and you can track, say, income source 1 if you want to, or source 2, and get really specific, and that helps with something way later on, again, tracking all your stuff. But now you have $3,000 here that needs to be allocated to all your different things. So you could literally go like rent, or, well, you wouldn't say rent, you would just say budget for the tracking category. But bills, you're gonna have rent here, so you have rent, electricity, etc. But I actually don't like doing it this way. I'm going to show you guys a really quick way that I do this, but it also takes a lot of initial setup. In the sheet that I started out, or the Excel workbook that I started out with, I have a budget that I already put together. So I take a lot of time to put this together. I use a table again. You're gonna notice I have the start dates, the income totals. This is just summing what's in the income, and then this is summing everything else that's here. So I don't like to type this whole thing out over again. That's just really too much. So if I have like the next month that I'm interested in tracking, so or budgeting for, I'm just going to copy the same exact budget, because usually it is very much so exactly the same. I said 2021, that's fine. So I can just take the previous month, those entire columns, and just copy it over. So I had this extra tab that's actually called budget that did not copy how I wanted it to. Let's do that again. Copy. Scroll back up to that specific area, and then you have everything already there. We can drag this stuff over. So this is a little bit more manual in this particular portion, but budgeting kind of is. Budgets change per the month. You know, December is always a very different month versus a lot of the other ones. But pretty much what's happening here is that I have the income that I know that I will be getting, or getting close to getting, and then where I need to put the money for every single category. So the question is, how do I get this into my ledger? So as soon as I get paid, how do I get it in there? So what I like to do is I just decide that I'm going to open up a new sheet. This is going to be called sheet 2, and I copy in that row. So we're going to pretend that this couple got paid what they were predicting that they would get paid. Paste values. So we got to paste those values, and then I'm going to come over here and highlight the special categories. Copy. Paste those values. And I just kind of have this process. I'm still trying to figure out how to make this a little bit more automated. This might be helpful to know that I'm just calling the category sheet cell A2, and cell A2, and cell B2, and just copying exactly what the category sheet is, so it always stays the same. So anyways, I copy this over into the sheet, and I want to get rid of all these blank values. So if I hit Control A, Excel already recognizes that I have this entire thing that might be something. So I'm going to insert a table, and I'm going to say insert it without this checkbox marked, which says does it have headlines? It doesn't. And I'm just going to filter for blanks. I'm going to take blanks out. And there you have it. You have your list of things that you want to budget for. So I'm going to copy this over, and then I'm going to Control paste the values. I do this again because Excel does this thing where it's actually still counting for those values. So if I actually pasted it over here, I'll show you real quick. It kind of leaves things out because it pasted it into those hidden rows. But now I'm able to work with this. What I'm going to do is say equal concatenate. I'm going to use a concatenate function and say budget for whatever date range. So we're just going to say January 1st through 15th, and I put that all in parentheses, type comma, and click on this cell. I actually didn't mean to take, and then we'll just double click this guy. Make that bigger. And let's get rid of these real quick. So now I have all these budget categories. So this looks nice and clean. So if I was looking at like, hey, how much did I budget? What did I budget specifically for? It kind of tells me specifically here. And then I mentally remember that I have debit, credit, and then the mental account that I'm putting data into. So I do a lot of copy and paste here. It's kind of a funny process, but it kind of keeps things clean and organized. And then I know from experience that rent is bills, transportation is the same, student loans is debt, car notes is debt, groceries is the same, alcohol is the same, personal beauty, medical, spouse one, spouse vacation, recreation, entertainment. This one is not the same, but if I really wanted to check this against my allocation, you could just use that data validation technique real quick and go to list, click the source, and just click on the column here and say OK. And if you go back here, you can say circle invalid data, and you see the invalidated special occasions. We're going to call this wish list and wish list. It's kind of redundant here, but those are things you can clean up over time. But pretty much what I have done is that I have a budget that should be $3,500 according to how much income I've made, which is $3,500 here. So what we're gonna do is plug this into our other sheet wherever we put it, which is hiding from me. Here we go. And we're going to go into the checking account, which is usually where money comes in. We also had supplemental income. We had a delete this, income source 3, $500, company, I don't know, Z, side hustle money, I guess. And what we're gonna do is come over to this blank temporary sheet that I will basically just delete here in a little bit. We're gonna copy this stuff here, and we're gonna paste it, copy this guy, so Control C, and we're gonna paste it right here. We're gonna paste it as values, and automatically I've already very quickly filled those dates. I'll say budget. It's very clean when you look at your ledger and you're trying to figure out if something went wrong or it's not reconciling right. This balance always needs to match your bank account, but you can see that, hey, I've told all my money exactly where to go. And then if I go to the allocation tab, you can see that it's already done it for me, which is like super awesome and powerful. And so you're ready, you're locked and loaded and ready to go. And that's honestly just how I've budgeted. I've done it a few years like this for a while. I constantly learn little things about Excel. But if you want this budget sheet, this one that I've just kind of thrown together, you know, just reach out to me via the link and I will send it to you. But that's pretty much it. That's what I do. There's a lot of other fun things I do with the data. Maybe I'll just show this real quick. Okay, you can get really advanced with the analytics here, but really what I've done, and this is real data, this is the past 3 years of our eating out trend. We spend an average of $460 according to the past 3 years a month on eating out, but you can see that it fluctuates up and down, up and down. You can see a really quick drop in March of 2020, and it stayed pretty low for almost a year because the vaccine wasn't out, and then we got desperate and wanted to go out again once the pandemic opened back up. But then you have other fun things you can track, such as, and I keep really close eye on eat out and alcohol, but if you look at alcohol, you can see just how dramatic it's been. You can see that we actually went without alcohol for five months, and sometimes this is not accounting exactly for specifically how much we spend on buying alcohol for others when that occurs. But usually at the beginning of the year, we drop our consumption, and you can kind of see that's happening now, according to this data. But you can pause this and take a look at it. But this is what you can do if you just track all your data this way. There's other categories in here that may not be so eventful and as interesting. Actually, let's do car gas. Car gas. How much do we spend on car gas? It was pretty moderate for a while, and then it got really excessive in 2021 around May. I think that's because we had family come in town and we were doing a lot more driving and seeing people, and that was right after, oh yeah, we did some road trips. That was right after we had actually gotten our vaccines and we're feeling more confident about going out and spending our money. But that's dramatic. It was pretty tame for a while. Pandemic happened, and then we did a whole bunch of driving. And I know we did 2 different separate road trips, and family came in town during the summer months, and then we were running a ton of errands to work on something else. Anyways, that's it. I know this is a huge long video. If you liked what you watched, if this was helpful, let me know in comments, and thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it. Peace.